The first time Staff Sergeant Raymond Ray Kowalski realized something was wrong, it was a Tuesday afternoon in November, and he was sitting in his wheelchair watching the FedEx truck pull away from the curb. He hadn't ordered anything, but he'd seen the truck stop, seen the driver climb out, seen the small brown box placed gently at the end of his driveway, right next to the mailbox post with the faded American flag sticker his late daughter had put there 12 years ago. By the time he got his chair turned around, made his way through the kitchen, unlocked the front door, and rolled down the porch ramp, the box was gone. He sat there for a long moment in the cold November air, looking at the empty concrete. He didn't say anything. He just turned around and went back inside. That was the first time. It would not be the last. And what Raymond Kowalski did next, quietly, methodically, without a single word to anyone, would eventually bring 3 people to their knees, cost one of them their career, and land all of them in a courtroom facing federal charges. Because here's the thing about a United States Marine who has spent 22 years learning patience under fire. He knows how to wait. Let me tell you about Birchwood Court. It's a short, curved street in Haverford Township, just outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. 9 houses total, a cul-de-sac at the end. The kind of street where neighbors still wave from their driveways, where kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on, and where somebody, it's always somebody, nobody admits who, leaves a plate of Christmas cookies on every porch in December. The houses are older, built in the late 70s. Brick fronts, small yards, big oaks that drop their leaves in satisfying sheets every October. The Hendersons at number 4 have a pumpkin every Halloween. The Garcias at number 7 have a garden that smells like rosemary and tomato vines all the way through August. Miss Dottie Pruitt at number 1 has lived there since 1981 and considers herself the unofficial historian of the entire street. In the fall of 2021, Birchwood Court was exactly what it looked like, a quiet, decent, ordinary place where decent, ordinary people lived ordinary lives. The house at number 6 belonged to Raymond Kowalski. And the house at number 5, right next door, had been empty for 3 months. The for rent sign came down on the 1st of October. By the 3rd, a moving truck had arrived, and with it, everything changed. Staff Sergeant Raymond Dale Kowalski, United States Marine Corps, retired. Born 1962 in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the second of 4 kids. Joined the Marines straight out of high school in 1980. Served for 22 years across 2 continents, 3 conflicts, and more deployments than most people have vacation days. He did a tour in Beirut in '83, the year of the barracks bombing. He was there for Desert Storm in '91, rolling across Kuwait in the back of a 7-ton truck with the 1st Marine Division. And he deployed twice to Iraq in the early 2000s before a roadside IED outside Fallujah in 2004 made that his last deployment of any kind. The blast took most of the function from both his legs. He spent 14 months in rehabilitation at Walter Reed. He relearned almost everything. Almost. He was medically retired in 2006 with a 90% disability rating, a Purple Heart, a Navy Commendation Medal with Valor, and a quiet determination that the rest of his life was going to be lived on his own terms. He moved back to the Philadelphia area where his wife Ellen had grown up, and they bought the house on Birchwood Court in 2008. It needed work. Ray did most of it himself from his wheelchair, with tools adapted for his grip and a stubbornness that his neighbors found both admirable and slightly terrifying. Ellen passed away from ovarian cancer in 2016. That was a hard year, the hardest. But Ray stayed. He wasn't going anywhere. He had his routine coffee at 6, the news, physical therapy exercises, then whatever project was on the workbench in the garage. He'd taken up wood turning, bowls mostly, sometimes small boxes with intricate lids. Miss Dottie Pruitt had one of his bowls on her mantel and told anyone who came over that it was the most beautiful thing in her house. Ray was 60 years old in the fall of 2021. He had a gray beard he didn't bother trimming, a Marine Corps flag on the front porch, and a tabby cat named Patton who sat in the front window like a sentry. He was not a man who complained, not a man who asked for help unless he absolutely had to, not a man who made enemies easily. But he noticed things. He always noticed things. The moving truck from number 5 was a rental, not a professional company, the kind you drive yourself. It pulled in at 10 in the morning on October 3, 2021, and it was followed by a pearl white 2022 Jeep Grand Cherokee with a custom license plate that read HSDLR22. The people who climbed out of that Jeep were Damien and Courtney Voss. Damien was 34. He worked in digital marketing, which, as Miss Dottie later told anyone who'd listen, apparently meant filming yourself talking about money on social media and calling it a career. He had the look of a man who'd never been told no, jawline sharp enough to cut glass designer sneakers that cost more than most people's car payments, a phone perpetually attached to his right hand like a sixth finger. Courtney was 31. She had a lifestyle brand. A real one, technically 47,000 Instagram followers, an online shop selling handmade-looking candles that were actually manufactured in bulk overseas, and a YouTube channel called Voss Vibes that had peaked at around 800,000 views on a video about their apartment renovation in 2019 and had been chasing that high ever since. They were not from the area. They'd moved from Austin, Texas, and they made sure you knew it within the first 90 seconds of any conversation. Austin had better coffee. Austin had better energy. Philadelphia was interesting, which is what people say when they mean exactly the opposite. The first red flag came before the moving truck was even half unloaded. Damien walked across the narrow strip of grass between number 5 and number 6, looked at Ray's Marine Corps flag and said loudly to Courtney, not even pretending it was a private comment, "Oh great, a military guy. Let me guess, he's going to be super fun about noise." Ray, sitting on his porch with his morning coffee, heard every word. He said nothing, just watched. Damien finally noticed him and gave a wave that was more dismissive than friendly. "Hey man, hope we don't bother you too much during the move." He laughed like he'd said something clever and walked back to the truck. Ray set down his coffee cup. He picked up the small notebook he kept on the porch table, an old green military-issue field notebook, the kind with the waterproof cover. He opened it to a fresh page and wrote the date, October 3, 2021. Below it he wrote, "New neighbors arrived, Jeep Grand Cherokee, white, custom plate HSDLR22, man approximately 30s, woman approximately 30s, initial impression noted." He capped his pen and went back to his coffee. The packages started disappearing in November. Not all of them, that's important. If all of them had vanished, Ray would have known immediately what was happening. But it was scattered, 1 package gone, then 3 delivered fine, then 2 more gone, irregular enough to make you second-guess yourself. Ray ordered most of his supplies online. It was practical. Wheelchair-accessible shopping in an older suburb had its limitations, and he'd been using Amazon, Home Depot's website, and a specialty woodworking supply company out of Vermont for years without a single problem. In November, he lost a $140 order of turning blanks, rare wood blanks, cherry, and figured maple, the kind he used for the decorative bowls he'd been making more of since Ellen passed. Gone, he called the company. They confirmed delivery. A photo of the package sitting at the end of his driveway, timestamped 1:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. He called FedEx about a separate package, a set of adaptive kitchen tools he'd ordered from a VA-partnered supplier designed specifically for limited hand mobility. Delivered, photo confirmed, package gone. He didn't want to think what he was starting to think. So he walked himself through the logic. Could be random, could be porch pirates from outside the neighborhood, could be a delivery error. He decided to mention it casually to Miss Dottie one afternoon when she came by with a container of her chicken soup. She did this every few weeks, had since Ellen died, and Ray accepted it with the grace of a man who knew when not to argue. Miss Dottie's eyes went sharp immediately. "Ray," she said, setting the container on his kitchen counter, "I don't want to say anything until I'm sure, but you're not the first one to mention something going missing." She told him that the Garcia family at number 7 had lost a package in October, and that Mr. Kellerman at number 3 thought his mail had been tampered with, but he wasn't certain. Ray nodded slowly. "You're not going to do anything rash, are you?" Miss Dottie asked, watching his face. "No ma'am," Ray said. He meant it. A few days later, Ray rolled himself down the porch ramp and across the strip of frost-hardened grass to number 5. He knocked on the door. He waited. Damien Voss opened it in a bathrobe, phone in hand, clearly mid-something. He looked at Ray in the wheelchair with the specific expression of someone recalculating how much of their time something is worth. "Yeah." "Afternoon," Ray said. "I'm Ray from next door. I wanted to introduce myself properly. We didn't really get the chance when you moved in." "Right, yeah, Ray, what's up?" "I've had a few packages go missing from my driveway in the last few weeks. I figured I'd just check with the neighbors, see if anyone had seen anything unusual, maybe picked one up by mistake." Damien's expression didn't change, not a flicker. "Nah, man, haven't seen anything. Porch pirates are everywhere these days, you know how it is." He was already looking back at his phone. "Sure," Ray said. "I just wanted to ask. Have a good afternoon." He turned his chair around. Behind him, he heard Damien shut the door before he'd made it 3 feet. Ray rolled home, went into the garage, opened the green notebook, wrote down the date, the conversation, and Damien's exact words. Then he opened his laptop and spent 45 minutes researching outdoor security cameras rated for cold weather Pennsylvania winters. Direct hit now. Let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever tried to be the reasonable one, the patient one, when everything in your gut is already telling you what's really going on? Drop a comment and tell me about a time you had to hold back when every instinct said otherwise. Because Ray Kowalski knew exactly what his instincts were telling him. And he'd spent 22 years in the United States Marine Corps learning that instinct means nothing without proof. The camera arrived on a Wednesday in late November, a Blink XT2 2-pack weatherproof with 1080p night vision. Ray had also ordered, separately and at different times so as not to draw attention, 2 additional Realink 4K cameras with wide-angle lenses. He mounted them himself over 2 days, working slowly, precisely the way he did everything. One covered the full length of his driveway from the porch eave. One was angled from a bracket on the garage corner to catch the sidewalk and the foot of the driveway. The third pointed directly at the mailbox post and the street beyond it. The fourth, and this is the one nobody thought about, was a small, barely visible unit mounted inside the garage window, aimed at the side yard between number 6 and number 5. He didn't tell anyone, not Miss Dottie, not the Garcias, nobody. The green notebook kept filling up. November 19, 2021, package from Woodcraft Supply, approximately 12x8x4 inches. Delivered 2:11 p.m. per FedEx tracking. Camera footage confirmed, will review. He reviewed it that evening on his laptop in the kitchen, Patton the cat curled on the table beside him like a furry paperweight. There it was, clear as anything, 2:17 p.m. Courtney Voss in a gray hoodie and leggings walking casually down the sidewalk, bending down, picking up the package, tucking it under her arm and walking back to number 5. She didn't look left or right, she didn't hesitate. She had done this before and she expected to keep doing it without consequence. Ray watched the footage twice. Then he saved it, backed it up to a cloud drive, and made a note in the green notebook. He didn't call the police that night. He wasn't ready. He wanted more. He wanted the kind of evidence that leaves no room for excuses, no room for "I thought it was ours" or "there must be some mistake." He wanted enough rope that they'd tie themselves into a knot with it. The incidents didn't stop there. In December, Damien began parking his Jeep Grand Cherokee, with the rear bumper extending 6 inches past the property line and directly blocking the curb cut that Ray used to get his wheelchair from the driveway to the sidewalk. Ray's van, a modified 2018 Chrysler Pacifica with a hand-controlled lift, needed a clear run to that curb cut. Without it, getting out of his own vehicle became a significant physical challenge. Ray photographed the Jeep's position with a tape measure visible in the frame. He noted dates, he noted times, he did not leave a note, he did not knock on the door again. He filed a quiet, documented complaint with Haverford Township's Parking Enforcement Division. The Jeep got a warning sticker. Damien ripped the sticker off, moved the car 1 inch, and continued parking the same way. Ray filed again, photographed again, noted it in the green notebook. In January 2022, something worse happened. Ray had a routine medical delivery, a quarterly shipment from a VA-affiliated pharmacy. Compression supplies, adaptive medical equipment, and 2 specific prescription items related to nerve pain management from his injury. This was not a casual package. This was medical care, paid for by the Department of Veterans Affairs, sent to a disabled combat veteran. It disappeared. The camera caught Damien this time, not Courtney. Ball cap pulled low, hands in pockets, a quick bend and grab at 11:43 a.m. on a gray Tuesday. He was back inside number 5 within 30 seconds. Ray stared at that footage for a long time. He thought about Fallujah. He thought about the 14 months at Walter Reed. He thought about the part of the VA paperwork that said permanent and total, and about the way Ellen had never once, not once, looked at him differently after he came home in that wheelchair. He closed the laptop. He picked up Patton and held the cat against his chest for a minute. Then he opened the laptop again and kept working. Direct hit. I want to ask you something right now. If someone stole your medical supplies, not your Amazon order, not a birthday gift, but your medication, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. Because I'll tell you what Ray did. He did the thing that is much harder than anger. He did exactly nothing, except document. By February 2022, Ray had documented 19 separate theft incidents across a period of 4 months. Total estimated value of stolen packages, $2,847. That included the woodworking supplies, the adaptive tools, the medical delivery, several books he'd ordered, and a gift, a hand-painted ceramic mug with a Marine Corps emblem that his granddaughter in San Diego had sent him for his birthday. He'd been looking forward to that mug. But what happened on February 12, 2022 was different. It was a Saturday, cold, the kind of gray sky Philadelphia February that feels like the world is made of wet concrete. Ray had been in the garage all morning, turning a bowl from a piece of black walnut he'd been saving for 6 months, a particularly beautiful piece with a live edge, the kind you only use when you know what you're making it for. He was making it for his granddaughter for when she came to visit in the spring. He came inside around noon to eat lunch and glanced at his laptop. He'd gotten in the habit of checking the camera feed whenever he came in. The footage from 10:24 a.m. showed Damian Voss walking down the side yard between their 2 houses, not on the sidewalk, not on his own property, in the side yard alongside Ray's fence. He had a box cutter in his hand. What Ray had along the back section of that fence, running about 30 feet of old cedar posts and wire mesh, was a climbing rose. A pink new dawn climbing rose that Ellen had planted in 2009 and tended every spring until she couldn't anymore. Ray had kept it going. Every March he'd prune it himself, working from his chair with special long-handled shears. Every June it came in magnificent, huge, cascading pink blooms that you could smell from the sidewalk. Ellen had loved that rose. Damian Voss cut it down to the roots. Every cane, every branch. He worked methodically, without hurry, clipping the climbing stems from the fence wire and dropping them in a pile on his side of the property. When he was done, he looked at what remained, bare fence posts, dead stubs, and walked back to his house. Ray watched this footage on the kitchen screen, a half-eaten sandwich in front of him. His face didn't change. Patton jumped up on the table and put a paw on his arm. Ray sat there for 3 minutes and 4 seconds. The kitchen clock was audible in the silence. Then he picked up the green notebook. He wrote the date, he wrote the time, he wrote the word rose bush and drew a small box around it. He picked up his phone and made a call. Not to the police. Not to a lawyer. To a man named Gunnery Sergeant, retired, Calvin Reed, who had served alongside Ray in Desert Storm and who, after leaving the Marines in 1998, had spent 23 years working his way up through the ranks of the United States Postal Inspection Service, the federal law enforcement arm of the United States Postal Service, one of the oldest federal agencies in the country, with jurisdiction over mail theft and related crimes. Calvin Reed was, in February 2022, a senior inspector with the USPIS Philadelphia Division. Ray said, "Cal, I need to talk to you." Calvin said, "Tell me everything." Direct hit if you think Ray Kowalski is going to let this go. You have never met a man like Ray Kowalski. Because here's what nobody knew yet. Here's what Damian and Courtney Voss had no way of understanding about the quiet disabled man in the wheelchair at number 6 Birchwood Court. They had been stealing packages from someone with more resources, more patience, and more institutional knowledge than any ordinary neighbor. And they had just made their first and final catastrophic mistake. Stay with me, because what comes next is something I genuinely did not see coming the first time I heard this story. Here's what nobody knew at the time. Ray Kowalski had not spent 22 years in the Marine Corps simply as an infantry NCO. His last 8 years before Fallujah had been in a specialized role coordinating logistics security and supply chain integrity for forward operating bases in the Middle East. In plain English, he spent nearly a decade making sure that supplies got where they were supposed to go and identifying the people who were stealing or diverting them when they didn't. He understood chain of custody. He understood evidence. He understood documentation chains that could survive cross-examination. The green notebook wasn't just a diary. It was a legal record. Every entry had a date, a time, a description, and a reference number corresponding to the digital footage files he'd saved, backed up, and date stamped across 3 separate cloud storage accounts. He had 19 incidents documented. Footage on 16 of them, clear 4K footage, well lit by the motion sensor porch light, showing faces, showing the packages, showing the return to number 5. But here's the other thing nobody knew. Stealing packages from a residential mailbox or from mail delivered by the United States Postal Service is not just a local crime. It is a federal offense under 18 U.S.C. Section 1708, theft of mail. If any of the 19 packages had been delivered by USPS or contained items shipped through the postal system, each individual theft carried up to 5 years in federal prison per count. Ray had gone through his records carefully. 11 of the 19 packages had USPS involvement at some point in their delivery chain. Several had been shipped using USPS priority mail. 2 were direct USPS deliveries. And one of them, the VA medical shipment, had been sent via a VA contractor that used USPS for the final leg of delivery. That made it federal on multiple counts. Calvin Reed listened to everything Ray told him over the phone. Then he asked Ray to send him the footage, the notebook scans, and all the delivery confirmation records. He said he'd look at it and call back. He called back 48 hours later. Ray, he said, you need to understand something. What you have here is one of the cleanest packages I've seen in 15 years of doing this work. Are you willing to hold off a little longer? I want to build this right. How much longer? Ray asked. 6 to 8 weeks. I want to identify every qualifying incident, establish jurisdiction, and coordinate with the DA's office. Can you hold? Ray said, I've held for 4 months, Cal. 8 more weeks is nothing. What Ray didn't know, and what Calvin told him later, was that the Vosses were not the only people USPS had an eye on. Damian Voss had a business history that included a dismissed civil fraud complaint in Texas in 2019 and a BBB dispute in 2020 related to an online marketing scheme. He wasn't a major criminal. He was an opportunist. The kind of person who slides into petty crime sideways, who rationalizes each small step until the steps add up to something serious. Calvin Reed wanted those steps counted, every single one. And here is where the thing Ray did in November, that 4th camera, the one in the garage window aimed at the side yard, became important. That camera had caught something else, something Ray hadn't immediately registered as significant. In December, he'd noticed that Courtney Voss had begun walking the side yard regularly, not just to steal packages but at odd hours, sometimes with a bag, sometimes returning with one. On 3 occasions, she'd stopped at the corner of the fence near the mailbox post and appeared to be checking something behind the post itself. Calvin had Ray go look at the mailbox post. Behind the post's base, pushed into the gap between the concrete footer and the post itself, they found a small plastic bag containing a key. A key to the outgoing mail slot on the corner USPS collection box 2 blocks away. Courtney Voss had a key, an unauthorized key, to a public mail collection box. Where it came from, how she'd obtained it, what she'd been using it for, those were now federal questions. What had been a package theft case had just become something considerably larger. March 15, 2022. A Tuesday morning which felt appropriate. Gray sky the way Philadelphia does March, not quite winter, not quite spring, the air raw and damp with the smell of wet pavement and coming rain. Ray was up at 6 as always, coffee in the kitchen, Patton on the windowsill, the news on low. At 7:42 a.m. he heard the first car. He wheeled to the front window. 2 unmarked dark sedans, a Haverford Township Police Department cruiser, a white van that he recognized as USPS, Postal Inspection Service, because of the small seal on the door. They parked in a precise line along Birchwood Court. Ray watched 6 people get out, 2 postal inspectors in dark jackets, 2 Haverford Township officers, a woman in a suit he didn't recognize. He would later learn she was from the Delaware County DA's office. and Calvin Reed in a navy blue overcoat, who caught Ray's eye through the window and gave a single, small nod. Ray poured himself a fresh cup of coffee and went to sit on the porch. At 7:49 a.m., the lead postal inspector knocked on the door of number 5. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened. Damian Voss, in a gray hoodie and basketball shorts, coffee mug in hand, looked out at the assembled group with the expression of a man whose brain is taking several seconds to process what his eyes are seeing. "Damian Voss," the inspector said. "Yeah, what?" "Sir, I'm Inspector Harrigan with the United States Postal Inspection Service. We have a federal search warrant for these premises. Please step back from the door." Behind Damian, Courtney appeared in the hallway wearing a robe, her hair uncombed. She looked at the group on their porch. She looked at her husband. She looked back at the group. Then she looked across at number 6. At Ray sitting on his porch holding his coffee. Ray looked back at her. He said nothing, did nothing, just drank his coffee. The search took most of the morning. Items recovered from inside number 5 included, and the search warrant inventory, which is public record, listed these explicitly: 43 packages or package remnants that did not belong to the Voss family, including 2 packages addressed to Raymond Kowalski, 1 addressed to the Garcia family at number 7, and 4 addressed to other Birchwood Court residents. Also recovered was a ledger, an actual handwritten ledger, in which Courtney had apparently been tracking what they took and its estimated resale value. Investigators also recovered the USPS mail slot key, which subsequent investigation determined had been duplicated from a key Courtney had briefly obtained through a former acquaintance who worked as a postal contractor. That acquaintance was subsequently identified and charged separately. The total value of mail and packages stolen across all victims, including those outside Birchwood Court, was calculated at $14,340. Damian and Courtney Voss were each charged with 5 counts of mail theft under 18 U.S.C. Section 1708, conspiracy to commit mail theft, and unauthorized possession of a postal key under 18 U.S.C. Section 1704. The DA's office in Delaware County added state-level charges for criminal trespass and theft by unlawful taking, the latter a felony given the aggregate value. The civil suit filed by Ray Kowalski, with the assistance of a veterans advocacy legal organization based in Philadelphia, named the Vosses in damages totaling $312,000, including the value of stolen property, the cost of medical supplies that had to be reordered out of pocket while the VA processed a replacement request, documented property damage including the destruction of Ellen's rose bush, and emotional distress damages specific to the targeting of a disabled veteran. The Vosses had no meaningful assets. They were renting number 5. Their bank accounts, when examined by investigators, showed a pattern of income instability, significant debt, and what appeared to be an ongoing attempt to supplement their income through various means, including, apparently, reselling stolen packages through online marketplace accounts that investigators identified within 48 hours of the search. On the morning of March 15th, standing on the porch of number 5 with a federal search warrant being executed inside their rented house, Damian and Courtney Voss were asked to wait outside. Damian sat on the porch step. Courtney stood. Neither of them spoke. Ray finished his coffee. He went inside. He washed his cup. He went to the garage and started turning the black walnut bowl he'd been working on for his granddaughter. He could hear the activity from next door through the garage wall, the voices, the movement. He kept working. Direct hit. I want to know something from you. When was the last time you saw genuine patience, not passive acceptance, not defeat, but strategic, determined patience actually pay off? Tell me in the comments. Because what Ray did for 4 months, what he endured, what he documented, all of it with the quiet precision of a man trained to hold the line, that's what patience looks like when it has a purpose. By 10:30 that morning, Birchwood Court had come quietly alive. Miss Dottie Pruitt was on her porch by 8, coffee in hand, watching with the specific attention of a woman who had been waiting for something to make sense for months. The Garcias came out around 9, Mr. Garcia standing in his driveway with his arms folded, not saying anything, just watching. Mr. Kellerman from number 3 stood in his front yard in a heavy coat, hands in his pockets. Nobody shouted, nobody celebrated, nobody called out anything to the Vosses. There is a particular kind of neighborhood silence, different from indifference, different from peace, that falls when a community witnesses consequence catching up to someone. It is the silence of people who knew, who had suspected, who had gone over it in their own minds and said nothing because they had no proof and because you don't destroy a person's life on suspicion. That silence held over Birchwood Court for most of the morning. The Vosses stood or sat on their porch while the search concluded. They were not arrested that day, charges were filed formally over the following weeks and both appeared for arraignment in April. But they knew, by the time the last investigator walked out of number 5, that the life they'd built, such as it was, on Birchwood Court was finished. Courtney cried, quietly turned away from the street, her hand over her face. Damien stared at the pavement. At one point, he looked across at Ray's house, at the porch now empty, at the Marine Corps flag moving slowly in the March wind. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. The moving truck came in the last week of April, a small one. They didn't have as much to take out as they'd brought in. The neighbors were home, some working in their yards, some sitting on porches, normal Saturday things. Nobody came over to help. Nobody waved. The pearl-white Jeep Grand Cherokee with the custom plate backed out of the driveway for the last time at 2 in the afternoon. It turned left at the end of Birchwood Court, and it was gone. In November 2022, Damien Voss pleaded guilty to 2 counts of mail theft and 1 count of conspiracy. He was sentenced to 18 months of supervised release, 6 months of home confinement, and ordered to pay $14,340 in restitution split across all identified victims. He lost his digital marketing accounts. The platforms had been notified of the criminal conduct, and the HSDLR brand he'd been building quietly collapsed. The last public record of him online, as of this telling, is a LinkedIn profile last updated in 2021. Courtney Voss pleaded guilty to 2 counts of mail theft and the unauthorized postal key charge. She received a similar supervised release sentence and was additionally required to perform 200 hours of community service. The Voss Vibes YouTube channel went private in March 2022 and has not posted since. Her Instagram account, at one point approaching 50,000 followers, was deleted. The civil suit was settled in October 2022 for $187,000, less than the original filing but still a significant sum, paid largely through a combination of liquidated personal assets and a contribution from the rental property's liability insurance carrier, which had its own interest in limiting exposure. Ray Kowalski donated a portion of the settlement, specifically the amount equivalent to the value of the items stolen from his other neighbors, to the Haverford Township Community Fund. He kept the rest. He used some of it to build a new woodworking bench with better adaptive accommodations. The house at number 5 Birchwood Court was re-rented in June 2022 to a family named Okonkwo, 2 parents, 3 children, and a large, cheerful dog named Captain, who immediately made friends with Patton the cat through the fence gap in a way that made the whole street laugh. And the rose. Ellen's pink new dawn-climbing rose. In March 2022, just days after the search warrant was executed, Ray went out to the back fence with his chair and his long-handled shears and looked at what was left of it. The canes were cut to the base, but the roots were old, deep, established over a decade of Ellen's careful tending. He left them. He didn't pull them, didn't plant anything new in their place. He just left the ground, cleared it a little, and waited. By May, 2 new canes had emerged from the soil, thin and tentative, the way new growth always looks before you understand what it intends to become. By June, they were climbing the fence wire. Miss Dottie Pruitt, walking past on a Tuesday evening, stopped and looked at those green shoots and said, to no one in particular, "Well, there it is." Ray, on the porch with his coffee, heard her and nodded. "You know, I've thought a lot about this story. About Ray sitting on that porch in November, watching the FedEx truck pull away, watching the box at the end of his driveway disappear before he could reach it. About the cold, about the wheelchair, about the 14 months at Walter Reed and the 22 years of service and the late wife and the woodworking and the green notebook. People look at a man in a wheelchair, a quiet man, an older man, a man who moves slowly through the world, and they make certain calculations. They think they see vulnerability. They think they see limitation. They think they see someone who has been diminished. What they don't see is the training, the discipline, the decades of learning how to wait, how to observe, how to build a case one day at a time until there is no way out for the other side. They don't see the phone call to Calvin Reed. They don't see the 4th camera in the garage window. They don't see the green notebook filling page by page with the kind of evidence that survives a federal courtroom. They see a quiet man, and they mistake quiet for weak. That is the oldest mistake in the world, and it is almost always the last mistake a certain kind of person makes. Here's what I want to leave you with today. Damien and Courtney Voss were not masterminds. They were opportunists. They saw what looked like an easy mark, an older man with a disability, living alone, unlikely to have cameras, unlikely to fight back, and they chose him repeatedly, for months, without once considering that they might be wrong about who he was. They were spectacularly wrong. Ray Kowalski never raised his voice, never confronted them after that first November knock, never threatened, never demanded, never showed his hand. He just documented. He just waited. He just kept faith with a process he knew would work because he had spent a career watching it work. There is a version of this story where Ray calls the police in November. Nothing happens because there isn't enough evidence. The Vosses get tipped off and they walk away. We all know that version. We've all lived adjacent to that version at some point. But that's not what Ray did. Ray did the harder thing, the slower thing, the thing that required trusting that patience in the hands of someone who knows how to use it is not weakness. It is a weapon. Never mistake a quiet man for a weak man. Never mistake patience for permission. And never ever steal the medication of a United States Marine who has a 4K camera and a friend at the Postal Inspection Service and a green notebook with your name in it. Thank you for being here today. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know, or a time you had to hold the line when everything in you wanted to act, tell me about it in the comments. And if you know a veteran who deserves to be seen today, share this with them. They'll understand what Ray understood, that honor doesn't retire, it just gets quieter. And quieter and quieter. Until the moment it doesn't have to be quiet anymore. This story is inspired by real events and public court records. Names, locations, and specific details have been changed or dramatized for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental.